Mother canned everything she could and was always able to scare up a good meal when relatives or friends dropped in. Without a phone, there was no forewarning of company. Bear in mind, we had no electricity, so we had no radio, we had nothing, no phone. She was a wonderful hostess and could always furnish some kind of game or entertainment. We managed to live in the tent for 2 years and survived the winters of 1934 and 35, 35, 36, some of the coldest winters on record in Wisconsin. Spring was most welcome, but with it came the floods. One year, a few inches of water and silt covered the floor of the tent, so Dad put everything he could up on blocks, including the piano, and lashed the tent frame to the trees to keep our home from floating down the river. My mother and I stayed in town at my teacher's home for 1 week and also our pastor's for another week or two. As soon as we could get to the tent with a boat, we had to clean up all the muck inside. And when the water receded around the tent, we walked on planks for a few weeks until the mud dried up. Everything inside and outside smelled for weeks afterward. One spring day during flood stage, Mother and I rowed our boat to higher ground in the park, the city park, to get some water, as the well near our tent was inundated and probably contaminated anyway with flood water. As we approached the pump, a stranger with rather piercing eyes was filling several pails. He was rather gruff and hurried off. We watched him head for a cabin down the river about a half mile, which belonged to a tavern owner of questionable character. Supposedly, illegal gambling took place there, and local people were certain that fugitives were hidden out for a price. The cabin was very secluded and not visible from the highway. That afternoon, we noticed the same man and a woman high on a bluff overlooking the river using binoculars, which we thought was extremely strange. I had never seen or heard about binoculars. Several days later, a farmer north of Elma on a back road reported that he had pulled a very big fancy car out of the mud with his team of horses. The driver handed him a $20 bill, which was a very large amount of money back then. The farmer said he would never forget that face, which he recognized later from newspaper pictures. Mother and I then realized that the stranger we had encountered at the pump was John Dillinger. Several months later, on July 22nd, 1934, he was shot to death in Chicago. He was a notorious bank robber. For you people that are my age probably remember that. These years had to have been horrible for my family to endure, but to be able to survive without any kind of assistance was very important for proud people like my parents. Mother worked so hard to feed and clothe us. She was a former teacher, owned a home, which she had bought for her parents to live in, and yet she lived in total poverty and was totally dependent on my father's earning ability and misfortune. The Great Depression had hit us hard, but fortunately I was too young to realize the hardships that my parents suffered. However, I learned to appreciate a home and security at a very early age.
When you finally did get a telephone, you had a party line. So there might be 2 or 3 people on the line. You could never get it.
They don't know.
Swing,
In those days, you go to high school, you had to pass a very stiff test. If you didn't pass it, you wouldn't get in there. So the certain information you had to have. And a lot of farmers like that, they didn't have time to study, so if the girl went to college, that was really something, because there was not enough money to send the girl.
I have a question about your sheet music.
Oh, yes.
Because today, I mean, music is everywhere. People got music players. But
Right.
back in those days, with no electricity,
No.
the only way you could share hit music or any music was play it yourself. with
That's
sheet
right,
music,
instruments,
Right?
right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of wanted to bring
Yeah,
that point
yeah,
across.
right.
They made music on anything you had, on the washboard, they made music.
Oh, yeah, washboards and tin pans.
Right.
Jewish harp, harmonica.
But that's why we like going to dances on Saturday night from little on. Everybody went to dances because that was their outlet.
That's when you heard the popular songs of the
Right,
time,
right.
because you didn't hear it on the there was no radio.
No, nothing.
Right?
No.
Keep on smiling, keep on smiling, the
Yeah.
whole world smiles at you.
Yeah, right, right.
When did you move to Pewaukee?
I moved to Pewaukee in 1985, I think,
From Elmo?
from Milwaukee.
Oh,
I have to say that I'm a stranger here, but they've been very happy to have me. I'm from Connecticut originally,
Oh,
New Britain, Connecticut,
wow.
back in 1921, March 13th, 1921. The reason I'm here today is I came back, I was in the service, and we landed up at Camp McCoy, which is outside of La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Right.
And many people won't believe this, the first pass I had to go to La Crosse, Wisconsin, I was walking on La Crosse and I looked in the building, it was supposed to be a USO. When I went to the building, there was a girl standing right there like that. And whatever possessed me, whatever made me do this, I walked right up to her and I said, I'm gonna marry you. And you know what? I did marry her. First, I had to go to the war and get the war over with first.
Yes, sir. I've lived here since 1968, but my memories of my youth were on a farm in central, near Manitowoc County, which is a little isolated. And a couple of things that I thought are interesting about education, for example. In a very short period of time, generations moved from my grandfather, for example, being totally illiterate, to my father, who and his whole family had to quit school at the end of 7th grade and they were put out to work. Then to my generation, which went to college. So there was this rapid transition, and much to do with that poverty in which they grew. My father had a farm in 1932 when he married, and their milk checks for 2 weeks were like $7. And talking to something about Al there, I think my mother always talked about the first washing machine she ever had, and I don't know when that was, but they traded some pigs and chickens for that washing machine with the city dealer as well. And then going beyond that, I worked at Washington High School in Milwaukee for many years. So one of it wasn't just work that went on with CCC and so on. There was artistry that went on with that. We had at Washington, I wish that I could have a picture of them now, but where artists were hired by the government at that time to do murals and to do pictures. And I know in the big study halls in our school, we had like 30 feet wide and 8 feet high murals on canvas of the Industrial Revolution, for example, was portrayed in one study hall, as I recall. So there were, and somebody pointed out, like our park system was very well built by these workers and so forth too. So there were a lot of these transitions that took place during that period of time. That and they were different for all of us, because when Al talked about age 16, that didn't apply necessarily if you lived out in the country. We didn't have the city or even village rules that applied here that might not apply, and I'm sure the farmers around here are the same thing. I'm not sure.
I know a couple of those murals survive at Shorewood High School on Capitol, at their main building. I've seen those, but I wasn't familiar with others. I think I interrupted somebody.
Oh, okay.
He's next. Jack is next.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jack, I interrupted you.
I was just going to mention, because you had mentioned about the Saturday night dances, Boomer's Pub, you know where that is?
Yes, yes.
That used to be Bon Air, and that was built during that time, and that was where the Saturday night dances were.
That was also the old video at one time. I heard it was.
Someone told you that.
Jack.
Another thing about the Depression, you never wasted anything.
First of all, I want to.
Penny was
Oh,
talking.
no, let Jack talk.
Go ahead.
You gotta remember, he does not hear well, so if
Yeah,
somebody
okay.
asks him a question, speak up.
Okay, well, first of all, I am a Pewaukee boy. I've been here all my life, except 3 years in the service, a year or two at Marquette University, and it started that way. And my mother and father, my mother was a school teacher and a good one. My father was just an average man with a good head on his shoulder, and he didn't go any further than 8th grade. And this is not anything to complain about, because he could show the rest of the world a few things himself. Then it gets to the point where I get involved, and I went to Pewaukee grade school, Pewaukee high school. Pewaukee is just great. You're lucky to be here, to tell you the truth, and if you feel comfortable about it and you want to stay with it, you won't be disappointed. I spent the time in the service and the time at school. However, it was broken up a little bit by my father being ill, and the doctor next door, who also was a resident of Pewaukee, said, Harry, you're working too hard. You better stay in your house for at least a week. Well, my father couldn't really absorb that, because he was running not one, but 5 or 6 different businesses at one time with his 8th grade education. However, he had to work so darn hard that I would encourage anybody else to get all the education first and then use it. Then it gets to me, after I got out of service, I went right back to Marquette again, and my father got ill, and this is not going to take me real long. I won't keep you too long. After my father recovered, after about a week's time, then I went into his little office, which was down on the main drag in Pewaukee, and I said, I would like to get involved in the real estate business. I can do more, better than the real estate man that works for you. And my father's response was, I know you can. Boy, that's all I needed. Within 1 year, salesman's license. Within 1 more, broker's license. Took every darn course I could take. And frankly, I'm sure there are a lot of people here who probably heard of me as far as that goes. But all of that work and all of that effort was worth every bit of it. So I just want to finish up quickly, give you a break, and let you know that you get what you go for, and don't stop until you're satisfied. Okay?